Beautiful, mysterious, unique. Islands are worlds of their own. Places apart where life has evolved differently. But in our modern interconnected world, islands are also part of a global community that is changing, for better or worse. In this series, we're exploring the lives of islanders. We're discovering that no matter how distant they are from the mainland, how distinctive their histories, or how proud they are of their independence, islands can't separate their futures from the fate of humanity as a whole. In so many ways, these shores are the front line of global change. What happens here matters to us all. Just south of the equator, off the East African coast, is the archipelago of Zanzibar. It's a group of coral atolls and small islands, dominated by two large ones, Unguja and Pemba. Today, Zanzibar is home to 1 million Swahili people. Islam is the dominant religion. But over the centuries, these islands have known many cultures and customs. For 1,000 years, Zanzibar was a trading post. But the island's riches meant that many outsiders sought to control them. For hundreds of years, Zanzibaris have had to march to the beat of someone else's drum. Each new occupying force left its mark on the islands and their people. By the 1960s, ethnic tensions erupted in violence and death. The aftermath, extreme poverty and ill health. For some, a rise in tourism seems to promise a way back to wealth. In reality, most of the tourist dollars stay within the gates of luxury, all-inclusive enclaves. But across the archipelago, signs of change are appearing. From the wreckage of their past, people are building hope for the future. For women, it means living and working more freely without breaking the bonds of their society. For men, it means finding a balance between tradition and reform. These are islanders looking to emerge from the shadows of their past. For the first time in centuries, they're in charge of their own destiny. After all their troubled history, could this be Zanzibar's moment? Zanzibar City in western Unguja is the archipelago's capital. It's home to 200,000 people. Their modern lives play out against a backdrop colored by rich layers of history. New trade sits alongside the old crafts. stone town is the city's historical core. Once it was the vibrant capital of an Arab trading empire, but today only traces of its wealth remain. On the outskirts is Michinzani, the new town. Its sprawling settlements clearly mark the divide between ancient and modern. One resident who represents Zanzibar city's past and present is B. Kadude. In traditional Islamic Zanzibar, B has been an icon for many, always walking her own path, never quite living by the rules. Now more than 100 years old, B is known across the archipelago as the grandmother of Zanzibar. She's famous for her traditional tarab singing. Despite her age, B still performs regularly. The fusion of Arabic rhythms and Swahili poetry is a reminder of Zanzibar's exotic history. But today's bold performance is quite different from the way B started out. In those days, cultural sensitivities meant women could be heard, but not seen.
In the past, or a long time ago, you would do this. You would cover your face. Now we don't do this. We want all the audience to see us and look at us.
Those early concerts were much more than just entertainment. The songs were a means of social commentary. In the song Kijiti, B sings of a miscarriage of justice and the murder of a pregnant woman. B was one of a group of women who used tarab songs to raise awareness of injustice and social issues. A century after Kijiti was written, women in Zanzibar still don't have the same rights as men. They're expected to obey their husbands and fathers. In public, they're supposed to cover up and behave discreetly. But on special occasions and behind closed doors, everything changes. Led by B, the group are preparing for an intense, women-only rite of passage. This normally secretive ritual, known as Inyago, is rarely seen by the outside world. For the young girl at its center, this initiation into womanhood is a vital preparation for married life.
First, we scrub her and teach her how to behave, how to make her husband's bed, how to treat him well and bathe him. This is her role as a wife.
The women use the rhythm of B's drum to teach the bride how to pleasure her husband. The fun and excitement is intoxicating. But Inyago also has a serious side. Girls are taught how to handle difficult husbands, how to stand firm through the trials of married life. As Zanzibaris step forward into their future, B is worried this old tradition will die with her.
When I am gone from this world, it will go, if no one is around to continue it.
But as long as the ritual remains relevant to modern women in Zanzibar, it seems sure to survive. Today is January the 12th. The president is on his way to celebrate a pivotal moment in the island's history. Half a century ago, African Zanzibaris seized power from the Arab-dominated government in a violent uprising. For thousands of spectators, this is a chance to see their armed forces in full display. For the president, it's a political opportunity. But the route to these Revolution Day festivities began over 300 years ago. In 1698, after a long history of trade with the island, Oman conquered Zanzibar and declared it an Arab state. Under Omani rule, the archipelago grew into a powerful commercial hub. Zanzibar's thriving ports and bustling bazaars were at the center of a vast international trade network. The Arabs grew rich and powerful off the profits of one commodity in particular: slaves. With Islam forbidding the enslavement of other Muslims, it was the Africans who were captured and sold as slave labor. Kept for long days in hot, cramped holding cells, many died before ever reaching their destination. Around the world, the clamor for abolition grew, but the island slave trade continued to flourish throughout the 1800s. At its height, 15,000 slaves a year were imported into Zanzibar. The Arab elite used African slaves to fuel an explosion in clove farming. Zanzibar became known around the world as the Spice Islands. Even after the trade was legally abolished in 1873, slavery continued on the islands for another generation. By the start of the 20th century, the archipelago was firmly divided along ethnic lines. Arabs remained the ruling elite. They possessed most of the land and wealth. By comparison, the Africans had little. Finally, racial tensions boiled over. On the 12th of January 1964, the African population turned against the Arabs in the government. The revolutionaries went on the rampage. In a single day, 17,000 Arabs and other ethnic minorities were murdered.
On the day of the revolution, by 6 o'clock, the Sultan and his family had already fled in their ships. So many were murdered, just out of anger and hatred.
It was a genocide that went largely unreported around the world. After the horror, many of the surviving Arabs fled the island. Those who stayed, like Abdallah Nasser Abdallah, had their property confiscated and lived in daily fear. Even today, talking about the revolution brings back difficult memories.
My father was detained, and he wasn't the only one. They used to come and detain people and beat them for no reason. People fled because of this.
Isolated and without its traditional leadership, Zanzibar sought stability by uniting with Tanganyika on the African mainland to become the Republic of Tanzania. But the political quick fix didn't end the violence, which continued for nearly 50 years. Finally, in 2010, the two main parties agreed to put an end to the fighting. They formed a coalition government, and months later, the islands experienced their first peaceful elections. For many, the political change marks the start of a new chapter in Zanzibar's future. But on the archipelago's second largest island of Pemba, the landscape itself is a reminder of how difficult it is simply to wipe the slate clean. For clove farmer Abdallah, the 1964 uprising caused a sharp decline in the island's spice industry. Until then, most of Pemba Island was owned by Arabs, who used its fertile farmland to become the world's leading producer of cloves. Widely used in cooking and perfumes, the dried flower buds allowed Zanzibar's economy to flourish. After the revolution, Arab land was seized and redistributed to African islanders. But many of the new tenants neglected the farms. Thousands of Pemba's clove trees withered and died. With new trees taking 8 years to produce cloves, the loss proved costly. In the months after the revolution, clove production in Zanzibar dropped by 95%. Today, Abdallah is struggling to make a decent living from his trees.
These are the cloves. This is how we harvest them, and this is how we separate them.
But even a good harvest doesn't guarantee good profits.
We are forced to sell our cloves to the government. We don't have any other choice. We can't sell to outsiders.
Although yields are just a fraction of what they once were, 10,000 tons of cloves are still produced every year on Pemba.
The problem is that the price is so low, it doesn't meet our needs.
The Zanzibar State Trading Corporation pays the clove producers less than half the market rate. The low price makes it a real struggle for Abdallah to make ends meet for his family. For other, less scrupulous farmers, it means turning to the black market.
I've never smuggled myself, so I don't know the price. But other people are smuggling cloves to Kenya across the ocean.
Farmers can get up to 3 times the price for their cloves in Kenya. But the cost of smuggling can be extremely high.
Sometimes they get caught. They lose their clothes, their dhow, everything they own, and then they're sent to jail.
Once key to Zanzibar's wealth, now the clove industry is struggling to survive. All the same, for farmers like Abdallah, the new politics offer the prospect of a brighter future.
It seems like a new beginning here. The coalition government are trying to build a new Zanzibar. So not just for me, but for many people, things will get better, God willing.
Right across the archipelago, there are islanders desperately hoping for change. Half the population live below the poverty line, scraping a living from the land or the sea. Average income is less than $1 per day, and the cycle of poverty is hard to break. But there is one part of Zanzibar's economy that is booming: tourism. Beach holidays and historical city tours bring visitors here every year. The rapid growth of tourism is bringing new jobs and opportunities. At Forodani Night Market in central Stone Town, stall holders are getting ready to vie for business. As the sun goes down, the air is filled with the tempting aromas of skewered fish and fresh kebabs. Tourists and locals mingle to enjoy the taste of Zanzibar. Despite its benefits, tourism is not the answer to island-wide poverty. Many visitors are package holidaymakers who never leave the beachfront. Very little of the money spent inside the big resorts ever reaches local Zanzibaris. But inland, away from the all-inclusive hotels, there is one man who's trying to draw some of those tourist dollars into the local economy. Mustafa Makame is from Jendele village in southern Unguja. He runs tours that give visitors a rare insight into the real Zanzibar, showing how life in his village has developed in harmony with the local environment. Hidden in the dense undergrowth of the Ufufuma forest are a series of caves used for sacred rituals. Mustafa thinks they could be the key to attracting visitors.
Tourists can have the chance to meet the witch doctor and see how he works.
Generations of distressed Jendele villagers have come here seeking help.
This cave is used for people to be healed by a witch doctor. They come here when they're sick to ask for help from their ancestral spirits.
Left behind at many of the caves are small adornments and gifts, offerings to appease the demanding Shaitani. And the ancestral spirits aren't the only residents of the forest. Visitors to Ufufuma can also see one of Africa's rarest inhabitants. Kirk's red colobus monkeys are an endangered species, only to be found here in Zanzibar. The monkeys share the treetops with African golden weaver birds. Home to exotic wildlife and unique human traditions, Ufafuma could be a huge draw for tourists who are looking for more than just sun and sand. Already, Mustafa's scheme is generating vital income and bringing real improvements to life in his village.
We use the money raised from tourism to support our community as much as we can. For example, we've helped provide electricity for Jendele village.
Money has also been used to supply the village school with books and pencils. These free provisions can make all the difference as local families weigh up the benefits of education for their children. But even though the income they bring is valuable, visitor numbers to the forest are still disappointingly small.
The truth is that right now, we are only getting maybe 20 to 25 tourists in a whole year. We just don't have the ability to advertise outside of Zanzibar.
To really get his tours off the ground, Mustafa needs the support of the major players in Zanzibar's tourism industry.
We would like the big hoteliers to send us guests, and in turn our community will become well known in our country. One day, we hope, we'll get many more tourists to come.
But there are parts of the archipelago where outsiders are not welcome. Just 2 kilometers off the coast of Unguja is an island which has turned its face away from the world. Once, Tumbatu ruled the whole of Zanzibar as its capital. Now, islanders here choose to keep themselves apart. Known as the Watumbatu people, residents claim to be direct descendants of the Persian kings who arrived in Zanzibar in the 10th century. Today, they are proudly independent people, notorious for discouraging visitors. For Suleiman Mohammed Haji, being a native of Tumbatu defines his way of life. Every day, he goes out in his Ngalawa, or Swahili canoe, to fish for a living. Suleiman attributes his sailing skills to his distant ancestors who arrived in great dhows from the Middle East. Tumbatu Islanders still have a reputation as the finest sailors on the East African coast. But Suleiman's Ngalawa is too small to sail in deep waters, and in the heavily fished areas around Tumbatu, even the best sailing skills don't guarantee a good catch. Sometimes Suleiman goes home empty-handed.
It's the sea that keeps my life going. If I don't catch anything, I have no other means. I don't have any other way to make a living.
With a large family to support, Suleiman is under daily pressure to provide.
I have 3 wives. These days, my first and eldest wife helps on the farmland. My second and third wives are doing the housework. They also look after the young children.
And Suleiman's situation isn't unusual. Jongoe is one of the island's 2 villages and home to 4,000 people. Islanders live from hand to mouth. There's no paid employment. Life is tough, but villagers are united by a deep pride in their culture and history. At the heart of their island legacy is faith. Brought to Zanzibar by the first Arab settlers, Islam is central to life here. Watumbatu people are devout Muslims. Following Islamic practice, they purify themselves before praying 5 times a day. Gender roles are strict, and even prayer is segregated. While men attend the mosque, women must worship in private. Village chief Mwadini Makami is determined to keep out the modern influences he sees damaging other parts of the country.
Across Zanzibar today, whenever you hear of misconduct or misbehaving, there's never a person from Tumbatu involved. This is because we are following our religion and culture.
As chief, Mwadini believes it's his responsibility to protect Tumbatu's cultural integrity. For him, the key to doing that is to discourage tourism.
The tourists go swimming in the sea, and then they lie on the beach with just their swimming costumes on. Eventually, you see the villagers mimicking their behavior, and that's why I'm afraid of tourism.
But while the cultural cost of tourism may be high, the price of keeping it out could be even greater. Tumbatu is one of the poorest regions in the whole of Zanzibar. Islanders only have access to the most basic healthcare. At the run-down local hospital, treatment is limited to paracetamol. The isolation of Tumbatu is both its strength and its weakness. Soon, islanders will have to decide if the cost of maintaining it is simply too high. Even in the archipelago's capital, there are no guarantees of good health. Here, the barriers are physical as well as cultural. 1/3 of Zanzibaris have no direct access to clean running water. Some can collect supplies from community standpipes, but getting it home can be a challenge. Poor sanitation is another major problem. Waste removal is difficult, with less than 20% of Zanzibar connected to the sewage system. Without basic services, infectious diseases like cholera are a constant threat. The result? Life expectancy in Zanzibar is one of the lowest in the world. Just 48 years. Children are particularly vulnerable. 1 child in 6 will die before they reach their 7th birthday. In the southeastern corner of Unguja, a small team of people is trying to improve the odds for Zanzibar's children. Makunduchi is one of only 3 hospitals on the whole island. But it boasts a brand new clinic for mothers and babies, and already it's saving lives. For hospital manager Zainab Othman, the challenges in providing better healthcare are daunting.
The government's trying to build new hospital facilities all over Zanzibar, but the problem is the lack of skilled staff.
With extra funding from the British-based charity, the Makunduchi Project, hospital facilities here have been recently improved. But Zainab still only has 34 beds and 2 junior doctors to treat a population of 60,000 people. Even with such limited resources, the team are working miracles.
After the birth, this woman had a postpartum hemorrhage, which meant she had to have a blood transfusion. It helped save her life. It would have been another story without it.
As a mother of 3 and a trained midwife, Zainab is passionate about getting modern medical support for pregnant women. But convincing local women to use the hospital facilities isn't straightforward. For most pregnant mothers, the first point of contact is their village's traditional birth attendant. These women are experienced at assisting labor, but they're not formally trained like a midwife.
Traditional birth attendants are very important in our communities, and we must work hand in hand with them. We can help improve their skills and their knowledge so they can work more effectively and give safe advice.
Getting these birth attendants on board is helping to persuade more mothers to have their babies in hospital. But it's not only the traditional birth attendants that Zainab must work alongside. To win over the whole community, she must also get on board the Shehas, the village leaders. As a woman working in a man's world, the task isn't easy. In Zanzibar, a woman's place has traditionally been in the home. Few ever reach senior positions in the workplace.
This can make my work pretty difficult sometimes. People ask, why is a woman in a management position? It's just another challenge that I've had to try to overcome.
Zainab is a pioneer for women in Zanzibar. Her hard work and persistence has won respect and is helping to challenge the old stereotypes. It is these small-scale changes in attitudes and public services that are marking the birth of a new era for Zanzibar. Up and down the country, there are other signs of change. Just a generation ago, a female football team would have been unthinkable. Now, the Women's Fighters Football Club have won the right to play on their own terms. When they tackle men's teams, there's a feeling that there's more than just the game at stake. They are part of a new generation, fighting for a better deal for women in Zanzibar. And the revolution isn't limited to sport. In the streets of Stone Town, female building crews have begun patching up the crumbling houses. In giving the old capital a facelift, they're also building a new image for themselves. In the seaside village of Kidoti, in northern Unguja, women don't work just to prove a point. They have to work just to survive.
I have 8 children. Their father died, and they have only me left.
Fatuma Mashenga is one of a growing number of islanders who work the beach farming seaweed.
We're a group of women who all farm together. It's hard work. Sometimes when we go to harvest the seaweed, the ocean steals it. This makes it even harder on us.
Known locally as moani, the seaweed is valued for its gel. It's used in cosmetics, medicines, and even ice cream. But it's not just a question of picking what's there. The crop has to be trained and cultivated.
I go all along the rope, tying the seaweed on until I reach the end. When that's done, I wait for the tide to come in before I go home.
It takes 3 months before the newly planted seaweed is ready to harvest. Working every day, women can gather 700 kilograms of fresh seaweed a year. But harvesting is just the beginning. Fresh seaweed must be dried out on hot rock beds before it can be processed or sold on. In the fierce sun, it's back-breaking work. But for the women who farm it, seaweed has become a lifeline. As a widow, Fatuma's income is the only means she has to sustain her family.
I get less than half a US dollar per day, but if I don't work, I get nothing. The money I get is helping me so much. It helps my children go to school and to buy school books.
For Fatuma, education is the way to build her family a better future. It's a sign of the changing times in Zanzibar that Fatuma sends her sons to school, and her daughters too.
I didn't get an education, but I really want my children to attend school. I send them there and make sure they go, so that they don't end up with the same problems I have.
The profits are small, but Fatuma and her friends feel empowered by the money they're making. They formed their own small cooperative, branching out into making oils and soaps, high-priced goods which can generate a real living wage. As traditional exports decline, it is women like Fatuma who are building the foundations of a new economy for Zanzibar. And with it, they're revolutionizing their place in society. Across the archipelago, individual endeavors are combining to transform the life of the nation. They're pushing Zanzibar into a new phase of development, socially and politically. Life here has always been vibrant and colorful. The rituals and traditions of island life have lost none of their power. And now, there is a brighter future to imagine and reach for. The world is watching as the Spice Islanders begin to chart a new course for themselves. After all the storms they've lived through, Zanzibaris can feel fresh wind in their sails.